Yeah, the mouse too.
Do you have the mouse? It's right down there.
Could you grab it?
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Have fun.
but,
Test. Morning, guys. We're gonna give people a chance to get into the chat room, and then we'll be get into the Google Meet, and then we'll get started for this morning. You'll find that there's a chat function over on the right-hand side, so if you want to type over there, you absolutely can. Make sure that you mute beforehand so that you're not broadcasting everything about yourself to the world. If you are not muted, I can mute you personally here, but then I'm finding trouble unmuting that. Also, if you have questions that need to be brought up by yourself, like let's say you've got a lot of details that you want to bring in, we can do unmuting and talk person to person as well. Just give me a heads up that that's something you'd like to do over in the chat function on the right-hand side. But we're going to give people a few minutes to jump in. We'll get started at around 8, and hopefully you guys are doing good. You doing all right? Right now? No, I think Fortnite right now would be a bad idea. Let me try later on doing a test version though, and seeing what happens when you use this sort of bandwidth. Because I am plugged in directly, I just don't want to have the first time that I do this get disrupted because you're jumping in that way. Before I get started, you doing all right, Abby? Before I get started, you doing okay? All right. Test. Yikes. Thanks, Graham. Good morning, guys. It's 8 o'clock. We'll get started. For you guys, first of all, my hope is that the past couple of weeks hasn't been too out of whack for you, but you are living in incredibly weird times. And so while it's unfortunate what's been taking place, especially when it comes to the canceling of school and whatever, and especially if you had spring break plans, you have my sympathy if you were planning on going someplace exotic and nice and instead you got to explore the inside of your house. We are living in a time where obviously being connected to the global community means that we have connection to global disease. If you could please make sure you mute your microphone, that'd be fantastic. Good morning, by the way. So what you'll find is, number one, if you've got anything that you would like to say during the session, make sure you use the chat function that's on the right-hand side of your screen. That way, with 50 plus people, we've got 90 some kids in class. Some people are going to watch this later. I'm recording this so that you're able to watch it later on if you would like to do so. But please make sure that if you do have something that you want to bring up, I'm watching the chat function off to the side of my second computer. So I'll be able to answer any questions you guys have. When it comes to the situation that you are working with inside of our school and with the College Board, that's the purpose of today, is to kind of give you just some footing for the next month and a half as we start moving towards the AP test. We want to give you some confidence that you guys know what you're supposed to be preparing for, what you're supposed to be doing, and to be able to satisfy any questions you guys have about that. We also want to make sure that you guys are feeling confident about protecting your grades. And the fortunate thing is that you've been trained in throughout the course of this year. We've done some flipped classroom sort of work. We have done review sessions online. So where other teachers are having a really steep learning curve, we've already done some of this. And the only thing that our district is still trying to figure out is what's going to be happening with your assessment. What does grades look like? What do tests look like? And a lot of that is up in the air, partially because of where we're coming from when it comes to the response that we're going to have to the diseases that we're facing. So the first thing I'd like to highlight for you is your attendance. They do require us as part of the online learning. The state of Minnesota is super worried about just the idea of if they're funding school and they're paying us for our job and they're trusting that you're getting an actual quality education, they want to make sure that you're putting in the time to actually be in the education process. So I'm going to show you some screens here. So let me bring this here and see what that does for me. So you're going to be able to get a chance to see my computer. Let me make sure. And I wanted to make sure you could still hear my voice over the top of that. So it sounds like we're doing good too. So the first thing is when you go to our Schoology page, you'll find that there's a couple different things that I wanted to be noticing. First of all, I would like you to notice right here is your coronavirus AP US History ongoing assignment page. This document right here is going to lay out for you what we're doing through the remainder of the class. And in particular, when I bring it up like this, looks like I already had the document open. This is what I had for you previously, that I wanted you to be reading about the JFK presidency during the time that you were out over spring break last week. They weren't wanting you to take time to be doing homework because that was supposed to be your break. You've had these AP classroom assessments that you were asked to do. And then today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a look at the Lyndon Johnson presidency. So that's where I would like you to be reading if you haven't done so yet, finishing up with chapter 37. And being good with what's going on with Lyndon Johnson, including this AP classroom stuff that you've got here. We're waiting until the middle of this week to find out full details from the College Board about what's going on with your AP test. What we do know about the AP test is that they are getting rid of huge chunks of it this year for you guys, and you will be taking the test at home. From my perspective, what they've already told us are these things. Number one, I was hired back in December to be an AP reader. When I was hired to be an AP reader, they hired me to fly down to Tampa so I would be able to train other readers into the process. They have now canceled my reservations for my flight and my hotel, and they've told us that the online reading is off. So we're not going to be flown anywhere because the College Board is concerned that we'll still be wrestling with coronavirus issues when we get to the end of May. What they've also announced then is that they're doing all of this online, that you're going to have a 45-minute window for testing. And so even though they haven't told us definitively, and I don't want you to take this as written in stone, What I do know is that at the AP reading, they have been moving a lot of our AP grading for short answer essays from in-person grading to online grading. And so I would bet that what you're going to be doing when you take your AP test is a few short answer essay sets that you'll be doing at home. And I'm betting that they're going to be tricky enough to make it really difficult to cheat off of those. But then they're also planning on running your writing through a plagiarism checker, kind of like I do with Turnitin, to find out if you are actually lifting stuff from the internet or other sorts of places. Again, I'll be able to give you more detail about that, but for you guys, your AP test is only going to be covering periods 1 through 7 as its focal point. For our class, though, we've already done periods 1 through 7. We have already taught you how to do short answer essay sets. So my plan is between now and the time that we are done doing this class, I do plan on teaching you the rest of US history all the way up until present time for 2 different reasons. Number one, it's important to understand the way that the United States history works, especially now that you're living through what we're living through currently. And in just a second, I'll give you just a quick synopsis of what I understand when it comes to coronavirus and what we're wrestling with currently. But then also being able to understand what's going on with the response to that. And in particular, with President Trump, he has demonstrated very much a lot of the stuff that we've been discussing in class in order to be able to try to rally around the idea of both preserving the economy and then also trying to deal with the coronavirus issues. So my plan today is to give you some instruction about Lyndon Johnson and the Johnson presidency. So I'm going to be working with your chapter 37 notes today. And what I do plan is I do plan on eventually collecting your notes from you guys, either electronically or through some other sort of function, perhaps photographing them or whatever. I'm not certain yet. And the problem that we're facing is that as a state, we've been waiting for guidance from the president, and the president has been very much flip-flopping as far as how his feelings have been with coronavirus. Initially, he was saying that we were going to be back by Easter. And fortunately, enough governors and enough scientists and doctors were able to impress upon him what he announced yesterday, that we are going to be maintaining structure maintaining the guidelines. Hold on just a second. You need help, Jack? What? Here you go. All right, sorry guys. My boy ran out of toilet paper in the bathroom, and so that's something I normally don't have to wrestle with while I'm teaching you guys. So anyways, President Trump has announced that we are going to be maintaining our current procedures until at least April 30th to deal with the coronavirus. And so that's what our state has been wrestling with. When the president was saying that we might be back to full normal by Easter, that kind of put a lot of us teachers on hold to try to figure out what we're going to be doing. And was this going to be temporary or long term? We're now looking at potentially a month or a month plus. And for many doctors, they're saying it's pretty ambitious to say that we're going to be back to normal by even April 30th. So I don't know what the grading procedures are going to look like. We're going to maintain, though, these 2 different tracks. Number one, we're going to be maintaining the idea that we're going to be, first of all, let me see here. That was not what I wanted to do. Number one, we're going to be focusing on getting your content covered for Lyndon Johnson going forward. We'll also be taking time throughout the course of the week to be able to review for the AP test, especially once we get more detail for what the AP test is looking for. If you are worried about grades or whatever, do not be worried about them right now. We're just trying to continue getting you instructions so you guys are staying good. Again, if you do have questions, though, on the right-hand side, you've got the chat function. So if there's any sorts of questions, let me see here. Are we for sure going to be taking the AP test, or do you think that there's a chance that it will be canceled? What they're going to be doing is they've announced that there's going to be 2 different AP test options, one that will be happening in May and then one that will be happening later during the summertime. Both of them will be done electronically distantly. in your own home. And so the option is going to be there to take the AP tests. The question is whether or not you want to pursue that and whether or not you feel prepared to take that. And so that would be something where you want to be considering that. You want to be able to discuss it with your parents, talk to Mr. Daughter, talk to myself. But they're also kind of sorting out those details. But from what they've been saying, the online piece of this, even if we're still sheltering in place at the time the AP test is supposed to take place, we should be good. So hopefully that answers your question, Sophia, and we should be set. Madeline, would scores still be released around the same time? That is the huge, big question. And the reason why that's the big question, and let me see what happens when I do this. Hey, I'm back. All right. The big question that we have is orchestrating this. Like the last 2 years that they've done the online grading for short answer essay tests have both had technical difficulties. Once 2 years ago, the issue that they had was that when they were grading, something got miskeyed for a while. Some of the readers were getting told that they were grading incorrectly when they were grading correctly, and then they had to back check all of that stuff. Last year, they had problems trying to figure out how do you monitor and keep people working at the pace that they should. And now they're thinking about using way more people to make this only the function for grading only these one things, training these people, getting them up to pace, having them get all these things done is really a daunting task. And so I don't know when they'll be releasing their scores. My hope is that they're able to get them done in a reasonable amount of time, since every single year we always will have 3 short answer essay sets anyways. If this is all that we've got people grading, then hopefully we'll be able to process them pretty quickly. Finn, for your question, will we continue taking our normal chapter tests? That's really what we're up in the air about. And in particular, like I mentioned, when we look at the response that we've had from the national government, one of the things that we're wrestling with right now is a president whose politics is very much in favor of small government, laissez-faire, hands-off business. And so the president has very much been worried recently about how is our economy going to work. Are you waving at me, Annika? That's so sweet. And so what we've had recently is the president saying things like, things are not so bad, that we're going to get better quickly. The economy is what we really need to focus on. And then as we've been watching recently, there are places like New York, Atlanta, and other sorts of places that are finding themselves struggling medically. And then other countries like Italy and Spain that are just getting overwhelmed because they're not taking this virus as seriously as they should. So Finn, I hope to have an answer soon. We're trying to get from the district a response about what it is that we're supposed to be doing with assessment and what protocols we can use. But they are not fully complete with those yet, because we are still up in the air from the federal government as far as what we might still be doing. Let me see here. Hamilton, so for most of our daily routine, we'll be waiting to see how. Okay, so Hamilton's question is about, for our normal daily classroom routine, we'll be waiting to see how the situation turns out and adapt while also reading and keeping our content strong. I would agree with that. So what'll be happening is day by day, I'll be working our way through chunks. Today, I'm going to be showing you the Lyndon Johnson presidency, in particular because it's apropos to what we're seeing going on right now with the federal government. And it's very much getting into the debate of what role should the federal government have in dealing with problems that are at that his time with Lyndon Johnson. His goal was to declare war on poverty with what he called his Great Society. So knowing about that and then understanding what President Trump's response has been is going to be very valuable to you guys to understand what's happening currently. I'm hoping to get more insights then, because now that the president came out yesterday and said that we are going to maintain what we're doing for at least the next month, that's something where Governor Walz has been of the same mindset. Governor Walz has been arguing that we need to keep our schools closed and whatever for the time being, not because it's going to stop the spread of coronavirus completely, but instead congregating people, getting people sick would then overwhelm our emergency rooms and become problematic. So we're waiting for some direction from the district as far as what our assessments are going to look like. If we come back together and can test in person, that would be great. I'm hoping to get some clarity soon, though, as far as what those assessments are going to look like. I will definitely be collecting your notes for credits, though. So make sure you're doing those. Make sure you're doing the AP classrooms as they pop up. And in particular, the AP classroom work that I'm giving you guys, if they have you doing short answer essay tests like I anticipate for the AP test, they'll be based on short reading excerpts, graphs, maps, whatever, that are totally what the AP classroom stuff is training you to do. Graham, if we pass the AP test, would the credits still have the same weight as last year because the tests would be at home, which would be a liability for cheating? You are asking the $1 million question. And I don't have an answer to that as far as how colleges are going to respond to this. And in particular, the thing that is problematic is if colleges get too heavy-handed about what they do with the AP scores. You've got a bunch of kids who have already been impeded by the coronavirus, and we don't even know what the end result of this is going to look like. So I would say let's cross that bridge when we get to it. Let's make sure we prepare as best as we can. My bet, though, is that with the short answer essay writing, because we've practiced this so much and we will practice this over the next month and plus, your competition is going to look really weak compared to you guys, especially if you consider the fact that you are one of the minority of schools in the country that has one-to-one Chromebook access. There are huge places around the country that don't even have like digital technology in the kids' hands, and so their learning stopped dead right at the point where we wrapped up, and many of them were at like World War I. So the College Board put out a few videos last week covering like the beginning of the 1940s and 50s, which is what we've already covered. So you guys are covered for your content. We've done practicing. So I'm betting that our scores look really good compared to the rest of the country. Sophia, what are the dates that the test will be on? I would use your concept outlines, the yellow packets that I've been giving you. They will be period 1 through period 7, which is technically 1491 prior to European arrival through 1945. And then what I would do is we're going to be doing 1945 to present because of the fact that that could be used as contextualization that will then help out your writing further, even though that won't be the directly applicable testable information that they've got going on. Madeline, did quarter 3 still end on Friday or has it been pushed back? We are so not tied to any of those deadlines anymore. The quarter 3 deadline, they're not concerned about. This is one of those, like in insurance policies, they'll have listed out all of these things that could go wrong. And then they talk about acts of God, which they use as their description of any events that you could not anticipate. And nobody anticipated that we would be looking at a pandemic that would shut down our entire economic and educational system if anybody would have been asked just a few months earlier. So for quarter 3, I wouldn't worry about your quarter grades. And in particular, since we keep a running tally of your grades, it's something where for your GPA purposes, it doesn't really matter anyways. So let me take a look. I think I got through all the questions that I've had so far. Keep them coming if you've got them. But let me give you, first of all, the stuff that I've been able to find out regarding the coronavirus first. And we want to be able to take a look at what historical background we've got going on when it comes to this. You're currently looking, and let me go back to my present mode. Sorry, I'm trying to learn on the job. So when I take a look at what's been happening recently, the thing that you should understand is for President Trump and his reaction to the coronavirus, he very much was of the mindset that he was hoping that coronavirus would remain kind of a Chinese sort of thing. When it started spreading, he's been very much about the idea of states' rights and letting states handle things themselves. The dilemma that you're facing is the one that we studied with Franklin Roosevelt. And the idea is that the only institution in our country that can run a deficit is the United States federal government. And so what's happening inside of our country is President Trump has been mentioning that we have tested now more people than any other single country in the world. But when you take a look at our tests per capita, we haven't come close to testing our per capita. Out of 100,000 people we've tested about 200 per 100,000, which means we really don't have good data right now to explain what's going on with our coronavirus spread. We have tested more than any individual country, but as a percentage of our people, we haven't done a great amount of testing. And our problem is, while we're like that, we have now a system of total freedom of travel that has not been impeded by the federal government. So since we've known that this is an issue, and the president received briefings about this back in January, people have still been traveling the country. And the nefarious thing about this disease is the fact that it can be spread by people your age who are then not exhibiting any signs of the disease, but they can pass it along to people who are vulnerable. When we take a look then within the country also, we're going to find that for the United States, when it comes to testing, there are some states that are very aggressively testing, like New York, but New York is also facing problems where their health system has been overwhelmed. And the president does have tools to do to this situation, like we saw going on with the Franklin Roosevelt Arsenal of Democracy. And we have something called the National Defense Act, Defense Production Act, which allows the government to take over certain factories, certain production lines, to start building out stuff. And New York is asking for the federal government to start building respirators and ventilators and whatever in huge numbers. The dilemma that we're about to face, though, is a lot of people are looking at New York in isolation. And the problem is people can still freely travel on our interstate highway from New York to other places. So what we'll find is that places like Washington State got hit first. You can see that they've tested quite a bit. But there are places like Louisiana who still held Mardi Gras just this past month with large groups of people who didn't take the coronavirus very seriously. And now they're watching this, their health system is getting overwhelmed. And the biggest problem that we're facing currently is the issue of what's called a cytokine storm. And this is what happened when you read about the 1919 Spanish flu inside your textbook. It was just like an aside that showed up for just a heartbeat inside your textbook. But the Spanish flu ended up killing millions at the end of World War I. And what it did was it got people sick. And the way to picture your lungs is imagine a sponge that has holes in it that allows particles to be able to move through. That's where your oxygen and carbon dioxide are transferred so that you're able to do respiration. When you get coronavirus or the Spanish flu, there are some people who, for whatever reason, their immune system does this, where their immune system overreacts to this thing that is now inside their body, which causes this inflammation that's already there from coronavirus to get worse. And this is where people end up dying from coronavirus, from getting pneumonia, that they then need ventilators. And if we don't have enough ventilators, then we've got a huge problem because of the fact that people aren't able to get the stuff that they need in order to be able to breathe properly. We're also finding that the stuff that I was saying to you in class has now been given a caveat where they said that for kids your age is less susceptible, which is true. But they have seen people passing away inside the United States because of coronavirus. And they're your age, they're younger. It's more about a genetic disposition to this than it is just the idea of trying to figure out young are not vulnerable, old are vulnerable. So the things that I've learned are these. Number one, when you are dealing with the coronavirus, if you are out, if you are in public areas and you are with somebody who has coronavirus, maintaining your distance is huge. It's not something where it's like one little sniffle and then all of a sudden, boom. It takes a little bit of time in a room with somebody who has coronavirus to have transmission. But the easiest way transmission takes place is by touching something with your hand, then touching your mouth, nose, or eyes. And that's the reason why the masks inside the hospital are such a big deal. So for us, when we take a look at where you guys are, Governor Walz was pretty straightforward. He said that even though it's going to hurt our economy, we need you guys to not be in school for the time being. And the idea is that you're probably going to know people in your life who are going to be exposed to coronavirus. We just need to give the hospitals time to be able to take people in, process them. Takes about 2 weeks on a respirator for our most affected people to get better. And then the hope is that when they get better, their time on the ventilator will be done. And then they will also be able to then use that ventilator on somebody else. And so the idea of you sheltering in place, not hanging out with your friends, whatever, it's a huge imposition. but it's the idea that we need to ration our resources in order to make sure that we are not going to be then taking away resources that somebody else could use. And it's not the question of could you survive coronavirus in isolation? It's if you get pneumonia and you've got 50 other people who are competing for 5 respirators, we could be in deep trouble. So that's the reason why the president has been asked to use the Defense Authorization Act, where he can take control of factories. He can tell them to start making stuff. The problem that you have, though, is in order to make respirators, you actually have to take control of the entire vertical process. So remember vertical monopolies that we talked about in class. You have to figure out where do you get the materials for face masks, and then you have to figure out how do you get those materials to a factory. Then you have to figure out who gets to buy them. These are all dilemmas that the president needs to wrestle with. And the president is conservative and he gets nervous about going that far. On the other hand, we have faced challenges like this. So I am wearing my NASA shirt today with the idea that we have experienced problems in the past that we've needed to wrestle with. And in particular, when I'm watching what's going on with President Trump, I'm thinking of 2 people in particular, Franklin Roosevelt and the arsenal of democracy. But then I'd also like to remind you of where we left off when I last saw you, and that was with JFK. JFK faced the problem where the Russians beat us into the race with Sputnik. They beat us into the race of shooting critters into space like Laika. They also beat us into the race of sending people up into space like Yuri Gagarin. And so when we got into the space race, creating the Armstrong High School that you and I know, we ended up doing so with this speech that came from President Kennedy to explain how we should react to challenges like the one that you and I are wrestling with right now. So here we go. Maybe.
But I do say that space can be explored and mastered without being a virus, without repeating the mistakes that man has made in the shape of his life around its own world. There is no strife, no prejudice, no bad.
Oh,
It hasn't gone.
it doesn't sound like that's working out too well. Essentially what Kennedy said in his speech was, he said that we choose to do the things that are difficult because they're difficult, because that's what Americans end up doing. And so that's very much the message that I have for you guys when it comes to what we're doing in class currently, is we're going to be working with the idea of how do we muddle through this time period by maintaining our procedures, by making sure we get through the stuff that you're supposed to be doing, and covering your content and keeping you guys safe. What we'll be studying then over the next day is we're going to be taking a look at Lyndon Johnson. So for Lyndon Johnson, we're going to be taking a look at the Kennedy assassination, Johnson's presidency, and in particular, we're going to be taking a look at the Great Society. What I would like you to do, please, is this. I'm going to want you to read through page 888 inside chapter 37. And if you've gotten there already, you're doing good. I'd like you to watch the rest of this America in the 20th Century, the 60s video, though. And what I would like you to do is I'd like you to be taking notes on what you see. And in particular, I want to be focusing on Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. Uh-oh, did I? Let me try this again. So using this page, I'm going to want you to read through page 888 tonight. It's only 5 pages. My hope is that you've already finished up chapter 37. But if you've not, please make sure you do. I'm going to want you to watch this clip from America in the 20th Century, the 60s. And then I want to be able to talk to you tomorrow about Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. What we're going to find is the same debate that we're having nowadays is the one that we had way back when. So President Trump recently went through this pattern. He, number one, said that we were going to be back economically by Easter. He also said that this was something that was kind of being overblown a little bit when it came to coronavirus. But then over the past few weeks, doctors, governors, and other people have said to the president, look, we've got a huge issue that needs to be taken seriously. So we stop transmission. And he has become more and more in favor of doing things to help out. And he has now become very proud. And this is something that is incredibly interesting to watch him do because he is somebody who leans in a conservative direction. He has been very much excited about the idea that he has now passed the largest stimulus bill ever in US history, bigger than anything that Lyndon Johnson does in this chapter, bigger than anything that FDR did, bigger than Obamacare, bigger than, I mean, it's really, when you take a look at like stimulus and direct aid to people, this is gigantic. We're talking trillions of dollars. Things have to be really bad to convince President Trump and other Republicans to go this direction. And you're going to see that in this chapter, because each of the things that Lyndon Johnson is going to do is going to be labeled by conservatives as being communism or socialism, even though many of the programs they create, like Medicare, Medicaid, and other sorts of programs, are going to provide safety nets to try to help out people. And they're the same safety nets that we're using nowadays to help people through this really tough time. I'm going to want you to get done with your AP classroom assessment once you get done hearing what we do tomorrow. So when we come back tomorrow, I'll run you through Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. We'll use the information you have here, make sense out of Lyndon Johnson. And then my hope is that as I'm getting more detail from the school system, I'll be able to then give you feedback as far as what assessments should look like. My hope then is that if you have any questions, you can reach out in one of two different ways. If you want to use either Schoology or my email, feel free to reach me in that sort of way. If you find that you've got bigger questions that need to be addressed by face-to-face communication, I can set up a Google Meet like this so that you and I can talk personally. Just let me know what it is that you need. But then what we'll be doing is, with this content coverage, when you get done, if you find yourself confused about anything, feel free to use technologies like this to help out with other people too. Make sure that you complete, and let me go back to my Schoology page right here. Make sure you complete your attendance for today, because I am expected to take attendance. So if you go to this tab in Schoology, the e-learning daily attendance, filling out this Google form right here by clicking on what class period are you in, what is your last name, what is your first name. We do this daily as our way to meet the state expectations that you and I, oh shoot, I did it again. Sorry. Let me backtrack. So inside Schoology, you'll find as the second link right here, your e-learning daily attendance. You're going to be expected to fill this out daily, sometime between 7:30 and 2 in the afternoon. And then I'm expected to take attendance. And so I'm supposed to mark you absent if you don't click in on this. So please make sure you click on this, get your attendance taken care of, make sure that you are good. And the final thing I'd like to mention is these two things. Number one, if you were somebody whose grade was not doing super when we went into this coronavirus e-learning, you've got tons of time at home right now, especially if you're missing like notes or AP classroom work or whatever. Getting that stuff done will keep you safe. You've got an opportunity to make things better. If you missed a test though, and there's a number of you who have asked about tests where we got interrupted, that's kind of a work in progress right now. So you need to hang with me for the time being until we get some insights from the district. But I wouldn't spend too much time staring at your grades anyways. There's a lot of stuff that's going to need to be happening with your grades from now, between now and June. And so that's going to be very much up in the air. The final thing I need to mention to you, though, is this is the big thing. I really am excited about the chance that I have to get back and see you eventually. I don't know if it'll be this school year or next school year in person. But what I do want you to keep in mind is there are kids your age who can get this virus. And even though it is something that is very unusual, it can have really serious consequences. The thing I've been telling my family is not that we need to live in fear, but you need to be careful. So again, if you are out in public and you touch anything with your hands, do not bring them to your mouth, nose, or eyes. That is the major way that people are getting sick. And that's what most doctors are warning you about. Many people also, if you notice what I mentioned, don't touch your mouth, nose, and eyes. You saw my hand immediately go to my nose. It's because of the fact that that's the way viruses have survived for eons, and they're going to be doing the same sort of thing now. Also for you guys then, if you do want to interact with other people, do it digitally, do it from a distance, keep yourself safe. I don't want you to get sick. And if you do get sick, I would love for you to get sick only after our medical system is prepared. Here is your biggest dilemma. We are now totally focused on getting supplies to New York. And our problem is this is going to be kind of like the attack at Pearl Harbor, where once we get all the resources to New York, kind of like in the first wave that happened at Pearl Harbor, the Japanese then attacked second wave targets that were now vulnerable. So now that we're focused on New York a ton, Atlanta is saying that they're within days of not having space in their hospitals. So is New Orleans. And so the dilemma that we're facing is that if you get sick here in Minnesota at the beginning of this outbreak and we don't have resources for you, what could be recoverable in normal times might be a little bit more difficult if our hospitals are overwhelmed. You guys know that I had a treatment on my nose before we went into this mandatory lockdown. The doctor I was working with now has told me they're doing nothing at the North Clinic electively. They want to have everybody hands on deck as like battle station sort of readiness for when coronavirus really takes off here. So just be safe, practice good ideas as far as like not getting yourself into dangerous infectious situations, even though I know that you are probably thoroughly bored doing what you're doing. If you are a video game person, my gamer tag on PlayStation is JPHAHS. I was playing Call of Duty for a while. I'm now moved on to MLB The Show 20, where I'm killing it. If you are looking for some other outlet to interact with me, particularly if you like noobs who, when I'm playing Call of Duty, I spend a lot of time running in the wrong direction because my boy points out I should memorize the maps, but I just kind of move towards where sounds are happening and then I get mowed down. Feel free to let me know if that's something that you would like to engage in, because while I'm not a good teammate, I can make amusing videos that I'm pretty certain will go viral because I'm terrible. So feel free to let me know if that's something you would like to do. I really appreciate you guys getting up early, and I really miss you guys a ton. Normal would be much better for me right now than what we've got going on here, but we'll make do. Do you guys have any questions then before I turn you loose this morning? I'm going to check out my chat room. Sophia, what was the second thing you mentioned? You said there were two things, JFK and Sophia, I'm going to need you to expand on that so I can help you out. Jonathan, you're so sweet. Thank you so much. And by the way, I've seen you sipping on your coffee while you're working your way through. You must have been one of the last people in, so cheers to you this morning. Sophia, if if you want to fire back with an email to let me know what's going on, I feel bad for you guys that your school year is being interrupted like this, that you can't hang out with your friends, but we'll get through this together. So feel free again to let me know if you need any sort of help. You lifted up two things and said there were two things. I don't know. I'm sorry. You guys know how scared I am, especially when I'm in this sort of environment. And so I'm certain that it's not super important. Instead, just make sure you work on your LBJ stuff for tonight so that tomorrow when you come to class, I kind of want to treat it as a normal, just lay out for you guys what LBJ was up to. And in particular, this is where we're really going to get around to the question of reasonable versus radical. One of your dilemmas that you're going to be facing right now, my doctor, the last time I visited him, he asked the question, when do you think we're going to start talking Medicare for all? And he's not a Bernie Sanders fan, but the thing that he made the point of was we've tied our health care to employment. We've got a bunch of people who are losing their jobs. We're talking about potentially 30% unemployment. All of these people are going to need medical services, and they're not going to be able to get them. And so the question that we're very much facing right now is, what does our medical system look like when you've got rampant unemployment and an epidemic? And if it's not Medicare for all, his question is, what are we going to go with? Because these sick people are going to go someplace looking for something. That's the eternal dilemma that LBJ gets to wrestle with that we'll talk about tomorrow. You guys good? I am too. Miss you guys. Hope your day goes well. And let me know if I can help out with anything. Thanks.
So where the bitches at though?
Yo,
Where these bitches at though?
Hey, what's up, boys?
Who's this sexy bitch right here? Oh my god. Viet, you're muted. Unmute yourself. Watch someone report me, dude. Let one of you bitches report me, bro. Jack Cohenstein, I'm looking at you. If you snitch on me, I'm finding you, bro. Jack Cohenstein, bro.